What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 17. Sleeper picks.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you some of my top DFS sleeper picks, super low priced and low ownership players that could crush value this week and give your lineup an advantage over the field. These are risky plays, meant for large tournaments only. Don't go all in on any of these guys. They are high risk, high reward picks. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, let's take a look at the quarterback position. My sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Justin Herbert has averaged 23.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.5 rush attempts per game. Now he's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 20.7 fantasy points here in week 17. He's 7,100 DraftKings salary and 500 more on FanDuel. So I like that FanDuel price. Now Vegas does think this is going to be a low scoring game. Only 43.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Chargers favored by 5. So I like Justin Herbert here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So another sleeper pick at the quarterback position, probably my favorite quarterback play on the slate, is Mitchell Trubisky from the Chicago Bears playing the Green Bay Packers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing quarterbacks, Mitchell Trubisky has averaged 16.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.2 rush attempts per game. But he's been playing really well lately, scoring 25, 15, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He's going to be about 3% owned, projected at 17.8 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's only 5,600 DraftKings salary and 1,700 more on FanDuel. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 50 points scored in this game, with the Chicago Bears trailing by 4.5. So you got a passing game script, a pretty high scoring game here. So I like Mitchell Trubisky here versus the Green Bay Packers. Now, if you're looking for a deep sleeper pick, take a look at Drew Lock from the Denver Broncos playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Drew Lock, he's only averaged 14.8 fantasy points per game on the season, but he's getting a bunch of rush attempts. He rushed the ball 5, and 6 times in the last 3 games, and he put up 16, 12, and 27 fantasy points in those games. So you can see this is a risky play. He has a low floor, but he's flashed that 25 plus fantasy point marker, which would make him an excellent play if he can reach that here this week. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 17.1 fantasy points here in week 17. And the reason this guy's an interesting play is because he's only 5,000 DraftKings salary and 1,800 more on FanDuel. So he's got a fantastic matchup, low salary, low ownership. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Broncos trailing by 2.5. So this is a high risk, high reward play here, but I like Drew Lock here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My sleeper pick at the running back position is J.K. Dobbins from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. J.K. Dobbins has averaged 10.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.6 rush attempts per game and 1.7 pass targets per game. But he's scored 14, 15, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 11, 14, and 13 rush attempts. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 12.6 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's 6,700 DraftKings salary and 300 less on FanDuel. So I like that FanDuel price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, with the Baltimore Ravens favored by 13.5. So you got a great matchup here and a running game script. You just got to hope that J.K. Dobbins can find the end zone twice in this game. Would make him a fantastic play for his salary. So I like J.K. Dobbins here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, another sleeper pick here at the running back position is Duel Williams from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the LA Chargers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Duel Williams is going to be the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs this week. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 10.3 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's only 4,800 DraftKings salary and 1,000 more on FanDuel. So the Kansas City Chiefs are expected to be trailing in this game by 5, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game. But with the Chiefs resting players getting ready for the playoffs, expect a heavy dose of Duel Williams here versus the LA Chargers.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My sleeper pick at the wide receiver position. Now, this is a sleeper pick based on low ownership. I like Chris Godwin from the Tampa Bay Bucks playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Chris Godwin has averaged 14.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7 pass targets per game. He scored 19 fantasy points last game off of 9 pass targets, and he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 15.3 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's only 6,600 DraftKings salary and 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Tampa Bay Bucks favored by 6.5. So fantastic matchup here, high scoring game. So I like Chris Godwin here versus the Atlanta Falcons. And another sleeper pick based on low ownership, I like Robert Woods from the LA Rams playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Robert Woods has averaged 16.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.1 pass targets per game. He even gets 1 to 2 rush attempts per game. And he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 13.6 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's only 6,300 DraftKings salary and 500 more on FanDuel. Now, Vegas does think this is going to be a low-scoring game. Only 41.5 points scored in this game, with the LA Rams trailing by 2.5. So, decent matchup here. Could be a passing game script. I like the low ownership on a player that is explosive, only needs one long pass catch for a touchdown to hit value. So I like Robert Woods here versus the Arizona Cardinals. And one more sleeper pick for you here at the wide receiver position. I like CeeDee Lamb from the Dallas Cowboys playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb has averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.9 pass targets per game. He scored 23, 20, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 12.5 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's only 5,200 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45 points scored in this game, with the Cowboys favored by 1.5. So I like CeeDee Lamb here versus the New York Giants. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My sleeper pick at the tight end position is Jack Doyle from the Indianapolis Colts playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Jack Doyle has only averaged 4.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2.3 pass targets per game, but he scored 9 fantasy points last week off of 6 pass targets. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 6.2 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's only 3,000 DraftKings salary and 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Colts favored by 14. So fantastic matchup. A guy who got 6 pass targets last game could be involved in the game plan once again this week. Near minimum salary player, so I like Jack Doyle here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, another sleeper pick at the tight end position is Austin Hooper from the Cleveland Browns playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing tight ends. Austin Hooper has averaged 8.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.4 pass targets per game. He scored 14 and 15 fantasy points in the last 2 games, only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 9.1 fantasy points here in week 17, and he's 3,800 DraftKings salary and 1,400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Browns favored by 9. So I like Austin Hooper here versus the Pittsburgh Steelers.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.